This is the Destroy Manila podcast, where we talk about the fight culture in the Philippines and in Asia. I'm Carl de Mesa. In the last episode, we talked about the history of Arnis. In this episode of Destroy Manila, we talked to Vincent Soberano, a native of Bacolod City who grew up in America and then relocated to China. He's an 8-time Muay Thai champ with over 100 pro fights and the owner of the prestigious Black Tiger Gym in China. More importantly, Soberano is also the striking coach of Weili Zhang, UFC strawweight champion. How did Soberano build up Zhang to a championship-level striker? And what does it take to train elite athletes to a world-class level? Soberano also goes into the travails of being an expat in China who set up his own business and triumphed in one of the fiercest markets on the planet. Now he's largely retired from coaching, he has since pursued his passion for filmmaking, like 2018's The Trigonal and The Blood Hunters, Rise of the Hybrids. If you love martial arts, you don't want to miss this great episode from one of the most decorated coaches in the world. Coach Vince's story sounds extraordinary, but there are elements here that a lot of us can relate to or understand. He migrated with his family to the States, and he had to struggle and hustle to put himself through school. Here he is telling us how he did it.
I was going to film school in San Diego. Film school is very expensive, and I had to finance my own, education. I didn't really have any real jobs. I couldn't even get a job at McDonald's or something. So one of the things I was able to do was, I started fighting professionally.
It's two threads in his life story that will overlap and alternate throughout our conversation. Another thread is his teaching. In the same way that his taking fights was driven by a need, his teaching started that way too. He was driving 2 hours each way to go from where he lived to where he trained. And then his entrepreneurial drive kicked in.
I was training in LA. I kept driving back and forth to Van Nuys. I was training at a jet center. And that's like a 2.5 hour drive from where I used to live in San Diego. So I decided that, I know enough stuff that maybe if I can just teach some people. So I started the school, just a small gym, like a small Muay Thai club in San Diego, which is the very first Muay Thai gym in San Diego ever. I started teaching just my cousins, and just my friends. So, it's like we can just work out together. But then, word spread, and then people started coming in, and the gyms grew and grew and grew. It didn't even have a name back then. But then it got to a point where we expanded like 3 times. So we became like the biggest fight gym in San Diego. May boxing ring kami, completo. It became kind of a full-time business while I was still going to school. Then the name Black Tiger came along because that was the nickname that the Thais gave me.
Black Tiger Muay Thai was one of the first legitimate Muay Thai gyms in Beijing and in China. Coach Vince trained Muay Thai in Thailand, where he got the ring name Black Tiger.
I maintained the gym for a while, but after I finished school and I was working in the film industry full-time, I had to give it up. I sold the gym to one of my students, but I just continued training on my own. Eventually, I went into software from film.
Coach Vince retired from fighting in the late 90s. He worked in the software industry for 10 years, and that brought him to China. That's where we continue his story.
Well, nandun ako sa Beijing, I just needed a place to train, so I tried to go to all these so-called Muay Thai gyms in Beijing. Pero wala mga Muay Thai na puro fake puro YouTube. So I was definitely not happy with what I was getting. Tapos wala namang MMA back then. And then I found a place it was a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu club sa Beijing that was owned by a Chinese American. So I started training with them, and then he voiced to me that talagang pangarap niya na to promote MMA in China, and he asked me if I was interested in that venture. Sabi ko, of course, it's my passion, so there's a way. So sabi niya, well then you'd have to tackle this full time kasi mahirap ang Chinese market. If you believe that you can transform the Chinese market, you have to tackle this full time. You have to quit your job and do this. At first, ayaw ko pa kasi I was making 6 figures. I was making good money working in software. I was just so in love with what I was doing that I was so unhappy with working in the software industry. So then I just made the decision, you know what, I'm going to do what Cortez did. I'm going to burn all my ships. I quit my job. I told my boss, and he goes, "What are you going to do?" I'm going to start doing film, and I'm going to start teaching martial arts. Sabi nila, "Wow, you're going to teach martial arts in the land of martial arts?" And I think, you need a psychologist, Tapos hindi ka pa marunong mag-Chinese. Sabi ko, yeah, that's true. But you know what? I have the language of martial arts. I have something to give. So yeah, 2005, I started teaching martial arts. And then by 2006, I built the Black Tiger in Beijing officially. My martial arts business in Beijing became so successful that for like 6 years, I basically I didn't even do any films. Altogether, I opened and sold like 12 gyms all over China.
Up to this point, Coach Vince's story sounds like it all fell into place. But there was a lot of work he had to go through and some sketchy stuff he had to overcome before he got to where he is now.
Around 2008, there was this gym called Club Hero that opened up down the street from us. We were just in like a 100 square meter space in this small office complex in Beijing, but we were packed. I had like 80 active students. And then this other gym opened up. It was a 600 square meter facility. It was up and down. They had a second floor where they had a whole jiu-jitsu room upstairs. The bottom floor, they had a full-size boxing ring. They had lights so they could hold events. They even have an indoor rock climbing wall. They had sauna, they had showers, they had offices. They have a cafe. They have a weights facility. It was the first ever mega martial arts gym in China. By the end of 2008, they approached me because they've been open for almost 6 months. 0 paid memberships. In fact, mga friends nila, ino-ofera nila ng free memberships. After natikman na ng friends nila and they really like Muay Thai, they'll come over and try out our class, and then they'll actually sign up. They'll pay for classes at our gym. So nalaman nila, and they came to me and they said, we want to buy you out. So I said, well, you don't need to buy me out. You can go into a partnership. So nag-merge kami. I was pretty happy about it in the beginning because I suddenly had the biggest martial arts gym in all of China, the biggest and most modern. Around 2009, I started seeing like some weird stuff going on, and I realized that they were scamming people. I sat in a meeting with 8 investors. Every one of those guys had a contract that says they own 35% of the gym. How does 8 people own 35% each of the gym? The owner, the main investor, lied to them and just took their money. And he would just like move money around, and he was using the gym to launder money. Because he was getting some illegal money somewhere, and he would just burst it through the gym. I became front, and I've had a good rep. I didn't want to be involved in something like this. Takot ako. I mean, like shit. I talked to my mom in New York, and she's like, "Oh my God, it's like it's not just gonna destroy you. It's gonna destroy the family." So I approached this guy, and I told him, "Hindi pwede ito." Sabi niya, "You have no choice. This is how it is. You're deep into this already." Sabi ko sa kanya, "No, I don't support you." And at that time, I was going to Australia to give a seminar. And so I said, when I come back from Australia, I'm going to blow your cover. I'm just gonna report you unless you give back all the money to these investors you owe money to. Pagbalik ko galing sa Australia, the police were there. All my things were out on the curb. Kinik-out nila ako sa company. And when I tried to do legal action, wala. It turns out na when I signed a contract with them, I signed a contract with a dummy company. So I lost a lot. I lost my students. I lost my money. So I was like completely broke. I had to move in with a friend of mine. I had no gym left. Sabi ko, ano lang gagawin ko?
Coach Vince has just lost everything. There's barely any money in his account. His gym is gone. His business investment is gone. But he always has fight in him.
I decided, the one thing that they weren't able to take from me is they couldn't take the name Black Tiger. If all I have left is my name, I'll go with it. A friend of mine had a small fitness studio. They don't even have group classes. They just teach like personal training or PT classes and stuff. So he said, Vince, if you want, I don't have enough room for a big class, but if my clients want to take private lessons with you, there's enough space here. Kinumbine ko yung martial arts and fitness. We had no room for sparring. We just had a little bit of room for me to hold pads for my students, or all sorts of kettlebells, whatever. So then I learned how to incorporate fitness and martial arts. So I broke down every move, every kick, every punch, and then I augmented it with weight training. I started teaching my students to lift weights, not the muscles for looks, for bodybuilding, but the ones you need for combat. So we did some isolation training, and we did some dynamic training. I started developing my system. I was teaching all these private classes, and then the word spread. Suddenly I was raking in money. I didn't really have a bank account. I didn't have money. I was living out of my friend's house. People were just paying me cash. I literally had a backpack filled with cash. I could afford getting my own place, and I talked to my friend who owned a gym, and he wanted to expand. We both rented a space where Black Tiger is now, and half of it was like fitness and like functional training. That was his area, and the other half was the MMA area. So I started training all these people. Then around that time, si Zhang Taichuan was the top MMA fighter in China. And then he won a couple of titles at URCC. So he started his own team called China Top Team. And so I had my own gym, and then there was China Top Team, but we're partners. Yeah, and I was Taichuan's I was his head striking coach. I was giving seminars all over the country on martial fitness. So I was targeting like fitness gyms and teaching them martial arts and how to incorporate martial arts into their fitness routine. And so we created the system that's called MFT, Martial Fitness Training. It's a trademark system in China, and it's spreading all over Asia now. So far, I have certified more than 30,000 fitness coaches all over China and Taiwan. I was coaching Taichuan. We were in WEC at the time, when WEC got absorbed by the UFC. They picked some fighters from WEC to fight in the UFC, and Taichuan was the first Chinese to fight in the lower ranks to fight in the UFC. Actually, he's the first Asian, to fight the lower weights.
From working with Weili Zhang, Coach Vince became one of the most sought-after striking coaches that helped to develop MMA in China. This eventually led to his coaching Weili, the first Asian fighter to hold a UFC championship title.
I started training the Chinese fighters back in 2005, and we've been through generations of fighters. And Zhang Weili is actually one of our later generation of fighters, but she's very promising from the beginning. A lot of people have told us that we'll never make it. It's never going to happen because, for many reasons, Asians are smaller bones, smaller stature. We don't have the money. We don't have the conditioning that the North Americans, Europeans, and the Brazilians have. Wrestling is not intrinsic to the Chinese martial arts. But persevere kami, and I believe that I can bring the Chinese fighters up to the world level, to the UFC level. I didn't know how long it was going to take, but I just felt like there was a lot of potential. This kind of victory, it's special. It's like the pinnacle. Say, not only that I have a student that won a UFC title, she is also the first Asian, not just female, not just Chinese, but the first Asian to win a UFC title. Ang dami ng Asians sa UFC, mga Koreans, mga Japanese, all stuff, pero no one came close to winning the title, and she did it. That was babae pa. I used to watch this girl come into the gym, get beat up by the guys because she refused to spar with the girls. Although stocky siya, strong siya, pero she's shorter, tapos yung legs niya are short as well. She's really fierce. Very fierce, very relentless, at saka mabilis. Yung biggest asset niya doon, I remember when I first met her, was that she had so much speed. When she came to us, she's already done some sanda, wushu. Yeah, so she went to school, she went to university, to the sports university. She majored in sanda wushu. And then, marami na lang siya competition. She's got a lot of ring time. And then by the time she came to us, she joined China Top Team. We were trying to look for female fighters. And so she was one of the female fighters.
You were saying, Coach, that her asset from the get-go was speed, no? Napansin ko po yun dun sa fight niya against si Jessica. Parang ang galing po nung blitz niya and discovering distance. And then, napansin ko rin po yung it wasn't actually the sanda techniques that were making the difference. It was the knees.
Well, hindi na siya sanda ngayon eh. Ever since I started teaching her, converted na siya to Muay Thai because she was constantly sparring mga fighters namin who were more grounded in Muay Thai. Ibugbog sa siya, so she was pretty much forced to adapt. Now ngayon talagang 100% Muay Thai na yung striking system niya. The way I work with my students is I also look at their weaknesses. So alam namin na si Weili is fast, she's accurate, pero she didn't have the same strength as Andrash. Well, our strategy is stand in the pocket and fight Andrash in the pocket and overpower her. So in order to do that, we have to build new strength for Weili. So we have strength and conditioning coach namin, this American guy named Ruben Payan. He's like the best in China. So he spent a lot of time. We did a lot of strength and conditioning training with Weili to bring up her strength in a short period of time, and it paid off. Kung hindi sa strength and conditioning niya, she would never been able to stand up to Andrash and stand toe to toe. And you don't stand in the pocket unless you're confident that you can match the strength. It's a very different ballgame if you don't have the strength.
Ibig sabihin po, talagang there was nothing that was a surprise for you. Parang first round knockout po talaga yung prediction nyo because of that?
No, we were not surprised at all. We knew we were going to win. We just didn't know we were going to win that quickly.
You'd think that with all this success, Coach Vince would just focus on MMA and get more fighters to win championship belts. But today, we find him pursuing this other passion. I'm sure you'll be there to guide the new generation.
No, unfortunately, I won't. I've retired from coaching. My production company is here in Manila, and we have a lot of projects here. So I'm the action director for this movie. It's called A Hard Day with Ding Dong Dantes. And then I have a movie called Circle of Bones, which is going to be released abroad. Most of the films I have are made for the international market, not so much for the Philippine market. Of all the movies I wrote and directed, so far only Trigonal was able to release in the Philippines.
Yeah, and I saw that you set up your own stunt and coordination team po, no?
That's not mine. That's actually my wife's. She's an expert when it comes to like rigging, wired stunts, things like those. We both worked together on Revenger Squad, with Vice Ganda a couple of years ago. Coach,
is there anything that you would like to impart to our local martial arts and mixed martial arts coaches?
I really highly recommend if the Filipino martial arts, especially Filipino MMA, pro MMA fighters, if they're really serious about it, don't try to make shit up. Don't try to make it as homegrown as possible, because we're not really ready to be a homegrown MMA force yet. You have to get out of your comfort zone, go to the US and find out and learn what they know and train what they know. Plus the fact that it's not just the techniques that you learn, it's the quality of the people that you train with. In the US, I bring my fighters from China, top team over there before, guys like, Li Jingliang and stuff. And, in China, I can put them in a Shark Tank and they can basically wipe out the entire gym. I can put the entire gym in a Shark Tank with them and they'll wipe them all out. In the US, you want to train at, say, American top team, man, after the second fighter, they're wiped out. Because the quality, the level of fighters in the US are just tremendous. So now you're training with this 10 to 20 top-notch fighters. You can't help but get better. These fighters all these guys that train at that level, they don't need to be taught much anymore. They need to be trained. They're not there to learn new techniques. They're there to get better, to be able to apply their techniques better, to get tougher, to get to see things that they normally don't see. And those are things that you cannot teach. Those are things that you can only experience. You have to be under fire to be able to figure out how these things are. And of course, that's where you have a coach who's always going to be pointing things out for you. He's going to say, well, the reason why you get stuck in a cage is because you didn't move your hip over to the right, and you should have pushed. You get pushed out with your left, and you should have done this because this is what he did, and this is what he did. But you can't really teach those things. those are things that the fighter has to experience, and then you have to point out as a coach that the reason why you did this and did that. The best experience is to apply your skills against the best guys out there. Iron sharpens iron. I take my best guys who have learned as much technique as they possibly could, and I sharpen them by sending them to the U.S. to train with the tougher guys out there. There's no egos involved here. At the end of the day, the only ego that's involved here is the ego that you get when you win the fight. So even if they get beat up in the gym, it doesn't matter. Then what matters is the day of the fight, that they have to win the fight. So we do what it takes.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the Destroy Manila podcast. Hope you enjoyed our talk with one of the most decorated and amazing striking coaches in the world. On behalf of my co-host JC, this has been Carl, and please do check out more of our episodes about the inspiring stories in Filipino and Asian fight culture, powered by Puma Podcast. Find out more of what we're up to, or just let us know of personalities you'd like us to feature. Find us on FB, IG, and Twitter. The Destroy Manila podcast is a Puma Podcast production. This episode was produced by Carl Joe Javier and edited by Mark Casillan of Puma Podcast.